First reading for today is from the book of Luke, chapter 18, verses 11 through 8. Then Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs would eat, and no one knew him in. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands. So he went off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. When the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Since the first reading.
Hi, my name's Tim. Many of you know me. For those of you who don't, can't hear me. My name's Tim, and many of you know me. Those of you who don't, my dad is Pastor Brian Allison, and the parable of the lost son, or the 2 sons, really it strikes home with me because I lived that. I moved away and ran away pretty much to get lost. And while I was away, I formed an addiction to drugs and alcohol, and really kind of lost myself and lost my way with God and with family. And things got pretty bad. And when I couldn't take it anymore, and I was at the last of my rope, I remember calling my brother and then my mom and my dad, and coming home. And I didn't just come home to my family with my blood family, I guess. I came home to my church family, and I was welcomed with open arms and no judgment. And I don't know how I can express how much that means to me and to my family, that I was able to come home. I mean, we didn't slaughter any fat cows. Coming home, and I just celebrated 3 years of sobriety. And I couldn't have done that without the love and the support that you guys give me. And some of you may not even have known about anything that I'm going through, but it doesn't change the fact that every day you guys help me in more ways than I can say. And it's through that love and support that I don't deserve, that I'm able to just keep going and keep staying sober and keep finding my way back to God. And that's pretty powerful. And that a church can do that speaks volumes of what the church is all about. So that's my story.
Continuing on in Luke chapter 15, verses 25 through 32. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound." Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, "Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him." Then the father said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." He had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jan Ziegler. I've been a member of this church for half my life. And I was a cradle Lutheran, so I became a Lutheran by birth, but I remained a Lutheran by choice. Christ Lutheran Church has been a wonderful community in which to grow my faith. And one aspect of being a Lutheran that I particularly value is the message of God's radical grace for the world. I also like the fact that we are people who are concerned with social justice, and that we are a thinking people. We don't check our brains at the door, praise God. We are an enlightened people. Our faith is an enlightened faith, not a blind faith. Pastor Brian asked me to talk to you this morning as someone who identifies more with the older son in the parable of the lost son, the obedient and dutiful son. And although I haven't been obedient and dutiful 100% of the time, I do get this guy. To illustrate, let me tell you a few stories about myself as a young adult. As an incoming freshman at Allen Hancock College in Santa Maria, back in the dark ages, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and so in those days they had to take these occupational interest tests. So I took the Cooter occupational interest test, and Mr. Penny, my guidance counselor, said, well, scored, if this were a young man who took the test, I would say you should study law and become an attorney. But because you're a young lady, the score says bookstore manager or religious worker. And Lutherans didn't have nuns, so bookstore manager it was. So I came to the Valley to Fresno State to study business, go Bulldogs, and never took a single business class. But that's a story for another day. So let me tell you a story, another story for today. One morning at Fresno State, I was on the lawn in front of the Kennel Bookstore between classes, and this young woman came up to me and said, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you born again?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "When were you born again?" And I said, "I was reborn in my baptism." That's what my pastor had taught us in confirmation. And she said, "Are you a Lutheran?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "My husband's a Lutheran." And she flounced off, a little bit frustrated that she was not going to win a soul for Christ that day. But you know, that's just kind of my story. I've always been a Lutheran and later a Christian. So why have I become a Christian, been a Christian my whole life? And I don't have a single answer for that question. But some things I know and the rest I suspect. First, I know that it's not because I'm better than anyone else. We are broken people of a fallen humanity, and I'm broken too. So that's not it. And I also know that we don't just get our faith from our parents. I wish we did. If only it were that easy. However, I do know that childhood experiences are really, really powerful. And those habits shape us, the ones that we form in childhood for the rest of our lives. They're things that we come back to. I'm thankful that my parents were great role models, that my family went to church on Sunday. I'm thankful that I had some Sunday school teachers who really had an impact on my life, and that church was also a place for social gatherings and friends. But I had some friends who walked away from church, a lot of friends who walked away. Second, I also think that some of us have our hearts softened by God in loving ways. Some of us get the gentle prodding, the still small voice in our hearts, the urgings of God through others. God always tries the gentle ways first. That was me. Like the older son in the parable who heard the message, "You're with me all the time. Everything I have is yours." Whether we're raised in church or not, I suspect that some of us are a bit stubborn. Some of us are a bit hard-hearted and want to do life on our own terms. And sometimes God will let us have our way for a while. Then, at some point, He asks the question, how's that working for you? Are you ready to do it my way? The ones who accept this invitation to follow Him, like the Apostle Paul, are the ones with the dramatic and wonderful before and after stories. Well, I don't envy your faith. I envy your story because you show the dramatic power of God in your life, given up for the lost and now found. Paul says in Romans 3:24 in the Message, out of sheer generosity, He puts us in right standing with Himself, a pure gift. He got us out of the mess we're in and restored us to where He always wanted us to be, and He did it by means of Jesus Christ. And a few of us have soft hearts our whole lives. That was my mother. She was the most loving person I ever knew. I'd like to close by sharing Romans 3:27 through 28 with you now, again from the Message. What we've learned is this: God does not respond to what we do. We respond to what God does. We finally figured it out. Our lives get in step with God and all the others by letting Him set the pace, not by proudly or anxiously trying to run the parade. However and whenever we get it, God's timing is perfect for reasons we know and for reasons we may never know. For some reason, I got it as a young child. For other Christians, it's on their deathbed, and I've known a few of those people. But for most of us, it's at some point in between, and that's okay. God has a plan for every life. Amen.
What powerful stories, what great testimonies. And now it's our turn to say thank you to God, whether we are prodigal children or we've sensed God in our lives each moment. We sing together, Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone.
been seated too long. I'm going to invite you to stand and welcome about 10 people who are around you. Share some names. Just name them up.
Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Rosie.
Hi, Debbie. Good morning. How are you?
I'm Jenny.
Good morning.
Okay, it's time to settle down. Because this could go on for quite some time. Well, grace to and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. And I have to just tell you how much it means to me to be able to follow my son a little bit earlier. This was an answered prayer today. So it's just not fair. Any of you who are parents have heard those words from your children at least a couple of dozen times, if not daily, then on an annual basis. It's just not fair. Well, life isn't fair. That's the parental response, right? And the father, who's in this parable that Jesus tells, also hears that from one of his sons in a different sort of way. It's just not fair. And you know what? It isn't fair. What that father did and how he responded was simply not fair whatsoever. Because after all, that younger son went off and had fun, while the older one stayed home and did the hard work. And the younger son went off and he spent tons of money, ran out of money, hit rock bottom, came home, and Dad welcomed him with open arms. He threw him a party. It's not fair. It isn't fair. Whatever happened to rewarding good behavior and holding those who are irresponsible with accountability? You know, I thought that life was about showing up and doing your best, about going to work every day and putting in those 8, 9, 10 hours. I thought life was all about rewarding the effort and the work that one is called to be about and to do. And so what this father does in rewarding the son who ran away just isn't fair. Jesus, you know, told this parable not to the disciples. He told it to the Pharisees. He told it to these guys who made it their life effort to work really hard at being good people, righteous people. They took no time off from this effort. It was a 24/7 responsibility, a hard work. And I kind of think that maybe Jesus is telling this parable in a way of saying to them, okay guys, lighten up a little bit. Have some fun. You know people, don't you, who have those steady, forceful work ethics, who do so hard and work so hard, but in their work oftentimes fail to experience the joy of life. I kind of think that Jesus is pointing a finger to them and saying, enjoy life, because life is good. But maybe Jesus is saying something else to such people with strong work ethic. You know how it is that some people put so much time, so much effort into their work that they become defined by their work. Who are you? Well, I'm a worker. I'm in retail. Who are you? Well, I'm in agriculture. I'm a pastor. They have no ability to identify themselves apart from what they do, from their work. So maybe Jesus is saying something to those people as well. You're more than your work. You're more than what you do to receive a paycheck. Maybe Jesus is going even deeper into the conversation. Because I'm sure you know people for whom their work is their pride. They're the ones who say, I did it. I built this business. I made my future. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I don't need anyone else. I don't even need God. Maybe Jesus is saying something to those people who've invested so much into themselves and have forgotten all the while who it was that gave them energy, gave them a mind, gave them gifts to do whatever they do. And so Jesus is taking aim at these Pharisees, these men who think that by virtue of their goodness and their hard work, somehow they will receive the reward of God's favor. And Jesus seems to be saying, it just doesn't work that way. Which is why I grew up loving this parable, and maybe you did too. Because secretly, all of us are a little bit or a lot like the younger son. We know about making mistakes. We know about running away. We know a little bit about getting lost. And so the younger son has a very special place in a lot of our hearts. Kids go south with their parents all the time. Many try to go it alone. All of us, at one time or another, have desired to gain independence from the homes in which we grew up. And all of us at important times in our life have tried to identify who we are apart from, not a part of, but apart from our moms and dads. And so we discover our way in life, our hard way in life. And sometimes those ways lead to dead ends. And sometimes the only course that's left before us is to return home. You'd expect the dad to play a little cooler, don't you? You'd expect him to maybe, well, he'd be glad that his young son's coming home. But wouldn't you expect him to give him a lecture? Wouldn't you expect him to say, okay, well, we're going to start out slowly here. I'm going to give you some menial jobs and test to see whether or not your desire to be here is authentic. You'd expect the dad to really be careful. But that's not this dad, is it? This dad runs to his wayward son. And before his son is able to get his remorse out, his father wraps his arms around him and puts a ring on his finger and dresses him in an Armani suit and says, we're going to have a party. This is not really a story about two sons. This is really a story about an incredible father. The kind of father I want to be like. The kind of father I would suspect every one of the dads who is present here today would want to be like. To his wayward son, he says, welcome home. And to that dutiful son that stayed home, he says, you've always been home. And I'm so glad that you're home with me now. The point is, he isn't fair. This father is beyond fair. He deals with each son individually where they are at and gives them mercy upon mercy exactly where they are at. Isn't that really the story of Christ on the cross for us? Oh, we all have heard that Jesus came to bear upon himself the sin of the whole world. But that line only makes sense if what you hear is that Jesus came to bear upon himself your sin. Your sin. And when all is said and done, and when you leave this earth and you come face to face with this God of ours, it will be a God who will appeal to you and approach you as you are, not in comparison with anybody else, but just with you and you alone. And I wonder if on that day when you face God, when your days of life are over here on earth, and before eternity begins, that God might say to you, I am so glad that you are here with me today. Welcome home. And now, come to the party. And you might say, you're throwing a party for me? And God will say, perhaps, no, not for you, but for my wayward son, Lim Forgy. But I want you to come to my party too. Will you join the party, or will you be disappointed? Welcome home.
Good